who hasn't been part of either music that has been absolutely refreshing, absolutely life-giving, absolutely calming and beautiful in the same way that like David played before King Saul when he was distressed? Welcome to episode 457 of the Reformed Brotherhood. I'm Jesse.
And I'm Tony, and this is the podcast where sound doctrine meets brotherly love. Hey, brother.
Hey, brother. So we're in our whole series of little one-off conversations, all kinds of things that just pop into our head, or we've had on a list somewhere that we thought, you know what, someday we should talk about that. And I think we've got another great conversation coming up on this episode. We're going to get into a little bit about how Christians should interact with and consume pop culture, maybe and especially things like entertainment. And I know that there are going to be people out there thinking, wow, these guys are going to do what Reformed people always do. They're just going to come out into their lawn. They're going to shake their fists angrily at the sky. They're going to yell at the birds. It might not be that way, loved ones, but you're going to have to wait. We're going to talk about it. It's going to be good. We're going to get after it. We all do it. Everybody loves a bit to consume pop culture. Is it possible? It might be somewhat of a gift that God has given us. Who knows? Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. But we'll get to that. But first, let's affirm with or deny against something in the world. So what have you got for us on this episode, Tony?
I'm going to keep mine super short. It was a frustrating customer service experience that I had today. In general, I have Comcast or Xfinity internet. In general, I'm actually very pleased with their service. I actually find them to be responsive. I've managed to get a decent price. I don't have Comcast television, so that's probably part of it. But my cable modem / router, which I've had, I don't know, probably for like 8 years, it finally died. So I bit the bullet and bought a brand new one. And those things have gotten expensive. And it's supposed to be a super easy installation. You plug it in, you do the little thing on the app, and it didn't work. So I had to connect with customer service through the app, and it seemed like everything was going fine. And then all of a sudden I get a link in my text message, and the lady who's chatting with me on the thing says, well, just scroll down and click on where it says accept and then hit okay. And I was like, that seems sketchy. So I read it, and she had sent me a link to change my internet service. She was giving me an $80 promotional price for the first year. But then it went up to $140 after the first year. So I went back to the chat app and I said, I'm sorry, I must have miscommunicated something. I don't need to change my service. I just need to activate my modem. She said, oh, no, you're not changing your service. And I said, no, I definitely am. She goes, let me explain this to you. And she went through and tried, and she's like, your speed is this and you're paying this. And I said, with all due respect, I'm not stupid. I can see that you're trying to change my service and I'm just not interested. And I had to fight with her for like 10 minutes before I finally said, just activate my modem, please. I'm not interested, full stop. So I guess I'm just denying, I get it. Like, you got to try to upsell. I used to be in sales. I don't have any problem with you trying to upsell. I don't even necessarily have a problem with you trying to be clever and intentional about how you upsell. Like, there are ways that you can do that without being deceptive. This was just deceptive. So I'm not denying Comcast. I'm pleased with my service. I'm denying this particular person and this really just underhanded tactic. It was really, really upsetting.
I mean, there is nothing like good customer service, right? I mean, the converse of that is what a blessing it is. And it's kind of a lesson to all of us and how we treat one another. That is whether we're providing the service or we ourselves are consuming it. It is just such a blessing. It's like so easy and so light when you get somebody who really wants to help you.
Yeah, for sure. And, I would not have changed my service, but I can imagine that somebody who was looking and was interested, if she had just said straightforwardly, like, your internet that you have is far slower than the modem that you're installing.
Right.
We can get you a faster internet speed and give you a large discount for the first year. Are you interested in that? I think a good portion of people would just say yes. Even if they didn't think it through, they would just say, oh yeah, sure. Faster speed, less money. They wouldn't think it through. That's not deceptive. If you present an option honestly to a consumer and they take it and they didn't understand the terms, that's not deception. That's on them as the consumer for not thinking through what they're purchasing. This was just straight out like, don't read it, just click on it. It's fine. totally underhanded, deceptive. And I work in sort of a kind of customer service, and I just can't imagine ever doing something that shady and calling it customer service. I was very disappointed. But
I mean, everybody has customers, right? Everybody
yeah,
has somebody they're responsible to, and everybody has people to whom they should be responsible in the kind of care, whatever you provide to somebody, whether it's your family, it's in your church, it's in your job. So
right.
I like that. It's a good reminder because, again, there's nothing like walking away from experience and being like, wow, that was so easy, or that person was so good to help me, or like they
Yeah,
really got me to the end that I was looking for and they did it. And I felt better afterwards than I did before I called. That should be like our goal. Like, what does
yeah,
great look like in every interaction that we can have with somebody?
yeah. Jesse, what are you affirming or denying tonight?
I'm coming back to the app well. And by that was a really weird saying of just, I'm going to affirm with another app. So I really love a good houseplant, but I'm no good at the houseplants. I really like the way they look. There's a lot of pressure with houseplants. Maybe people feel this way. Maybe you've not purchased a houseplant or been like, I can't be that person. So here's something that I can affirm with for you, loved one. It's a app called Planta. It's a Swedish plant care app, and it's designed to help both like novice people like me and I guess really experienced plant owners keep their house and garden plants healthy, which I know sounds super boring, but hear me out on this. This is what's cool about this. It offers smart, personalized care reminders for things like watering, fertilizing, misting, repotting. And it has all these things where if you, there's paid subscription for this as well, which I do not have, but I looked at all the options. There's some super cool things like you can use your phone to sense where your plant is sitting, how much light it's getting to really tell you, is this the right spot for my plant? Because, like some plants are like, we need partial sunlight and partial shade and afternoon sun and direct sun. And you need to water me, but not too much and not so often, but just the right amount. It's a lot of pressure. So
Yeah.
it's got all these fun features in it, including like an AI doctor. So you can take a look or a picture of your plant rather. And not only will it describe what plant you have, of course, but it will help you say like, hey, this thing is not healthy. Here's what you should do. So the Planta app might be your foray into feeling more confident about having some greenery in your house.
Yeah. I could kill a plastic plant. I could kill like a fake plant without trying. But I might check this out. You've seen my home. You've been here.
Yeah.
My house it's a mobile home, and so it's just one long line, and it's situated like almost directly east west. So I get direct sunlight over the top of the house pretty much the entire day, and we have really beautiful um, violet cone plants and some other like lilies on one end of the house that the previous owner planted. They're very beautiful, but they just get baked in the sun. And there's got to be something that can be done to sort of help them through this. Maybe it's more water or something like that. So maybe I'll check this out and see if that can help because they're not doing great. They didn't bloom very well this
Mm.
year, and I'm wondering if it might be. I don't know. It's been kind of dry this part of the year more than usual. So I'll check that out. That sounds like a good recommendation. There's a couple of different apps like
Struggle
this.
is
So this
real.
one sounds good.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of stuff that you can get free in it. Of course, they want to upsell you, as you just talked about. They're no Comcast, but they definitely would like you to purchase all their other features. And I bet for the right person, it's totally worth it. But I feel so much more confident now, mainly just the watering. You'd be surprised how
Yeah.
like, much pressure they like aloe plants. And also, I'm learning the names of my plants finally, which makes me feel more connected. Listen, this is like the app to help you take dominion in your house over house plants, which sounds like the lowest form of taking dominion, but honestly still shows how complex and complicated life can be and how God has made everything in this really wonderful way. So I'm feeling more empowered to love my plants and to hopefully keep them growing. I was going to say for generations, but I doubt that I'll be passing on these plants for generations, but hopefully getting just lots more greenery into our living spaces, which is always super fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I would like to have more plants, but I just with between toddlers and dogs and my ability to kill anything green that is in my home, I don't think it would be good.
That's fair.
Your sister, who is my wife, does a good job with plants, but
Yeah, she does.
even that the plants die just because they're around me. I'm not sure what it is. I have like
I hear it. Listen,
an aura of some sort that just kills plants.
it's difficult sometimes to grow in soil, which is one of the things I presume Christians often feel like when they're in the culture. And when
Ooh,
do you like that segue? We're so good with this.
I do.
And when you are consuming, when we say pop culture, or you find yourself in a place where you want entertainment and you want to rest, and I think if you're a Christian for any length of time, you start to ask yourself, okay, so what's my place in all of this? And what's interesting when I thought about this topic, which you graciously put forward for us, was that I think several times we've mentioned kind of cultural things, often in the affirmation and denial section,
Yeah.
where we've maybe come hard alongside something and said, this seems good. And other times we've definitely said, this seems very, very bad. But
Yeah.
we've never really had just a pretty honest conversation about, okay, so how does the Christian discern? What is the Christian's role in making that discernment? And how can we, like our houseplants, grow and flourish in that kind of environment to such a degree that we are actually bearing fruit by the power of the Holy Spirit, and yet, of course, separate from that culture in which we still find ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it bears saying, much of popular culture, media, whatever it might be, a lot of it is going to be a matter of Christian prudence and liberty. And I think it's important to say that because I think, we'll probably talk about like principles we use to try to determine whether we, individually or whatever, we're going to watch something or listen to something. But the Bible doesn't say like thou shalt not, and I'm going to say this example and it's a little bit ironic because this is actually a show that I think is pretty black and white, but it's not like the Bible says thou shalt not watch Game of Thrones.
Right.
Right? Like thou shalt not listen to, I don't know who the kids are listening to, Britney Spears. Like it tells you when the last time I listened to popular music was. Britney Spears is the name on my mind. But like thou shalt not listen to, I don't know, Paramore. I don't know. Name your pop culture band. The Bible doesn't give us explicit instructions about specific bands, movies, shows, insert pop, novels, whatever it might be. It does give us some wisdom principles. And then, of course, there's God's moral law. But even God's moral law does not necessarily apply directly to every pop culture choice we might make. So I'm sure Jesse and I don't have identical opinions. I'm going to guess that our thoughts are probably pretty close just because, we're influenced by the same people and we are running in the same broader theological circles, but they're probably not identical. There are probably things that Jesse would watch that I'd go, "Oh, I don't know if that's such a great thing for me." And there's probably things I would feel comfortable with that Jesse might say, I'm not so sure about that. This is usually a matter of Christian liberty constrained by Christian prudence and wisdom. So before we get into any of the nitty gritty or any specific talk of anything particular, I want to get that out there because yes, we have to be wise. We have to apply God's law, but we are not able to bind other people's conscience, and you are not able to bind other people's conscience based on your own particular opinion about something or your own interpretation of how the Bible is to be applied to a particular decision. Again, you can speak into a situation, especially if you have a relationship with someone, you can say, hey, I don't think this is healthy. I don't think this is in conformity with God's law. But at the end of the day, that is between that Christian and God as to whether or not they are applying God's law appropriately. And to an extent and to a great extent, between them and their elders, right? The elders have a different role of authority in a Christian's life than other Christians do.
And it might be worth saying as we begin that we're kind of talking about this, I think, in part because we all feel that pull to consume pop culture. And what I kind of teased at the beginning is this idea, is it possible that I think we're really speaking about consuming that in a kind of a way of entertainment, of like
Right.
rest and relaxation, principally. There are other reasons I think as well. And that might be to edify, to educate. But I think principally when we feel this compulsion to say, well, like you just give good examples, listen to music, watch a sporting event, watch TV, read something, fiction or nonfiction. I think what we're after there is this idea that we want to rest and that understanding that entertainment is a part of the rest that God intends for us to enjoy from our labors is by itself, full stop, a legitimate thing. So the question is a little bit more nuanced. Where is that line? You already gave, I think, a pretty good example of something that you and I would agree on, would say that that's a bridge too far to cross. Don't watch that thing, right?
Yeah.
Do something else. But the question is, how did we get to that place in making that judgment? And is there a place in there where we'd say, well, the Bible isn't explicit about, let's say, certain medium or even like specific things within that medium, that it is outspoken enough that we ought to say, no, we will not do that. So I think this is what we're after in part, is this proper use of entertainment involving, of course, analyzing worldviews, appreciating elements of beauty and creativity, acknowledging reflections of truth, but that also that in some way, all of this is God's gift to us. That while the Bible does not give us a great deal of explicit statements about how believers are to view entertainment, there is much we can draw out of scripture by way of good and necessary consequence, to borrow
Yeah.
language from somewhere else.
Yeah. And I also think too, like this is a question that often is presented as very simple and very like cut and dry, but it can be a lot more complicated than you think. And here's an example, and we don't have to get into this particular example, but
Let's do it.
you know, I think a lot of times people will take the example of blasphemy, right? And a show that is, or a video game, whatever it is, content that is intentionally blaspheming God is something that at a bare minimum Christians should be very wary of participating in and consuming. Just because it's something that openly dishonors God is probably not something Christians should be eager to participate in or to consume. But there are instances where a show or a video game or a book contains a fictionalized blaspheming of God that actually may serve the greater purpose of glorifying God. So if you think of like think of a book or a movie where there is a character who is a non-Christian, and over the course of the book they are shown to be blaspheming God, and then they experience a conversion, and the purpose of the book is to glorify God through this conversion redemption story. That character in that fictionalized universe is blaspheming God within that universe, right? Or within that fictionalized story. But the purpose of that blasphemy is actually to serve the greater purpose of glorifying God. So that's not to say that automatically anything like that gets a pass, right? That can be done well, that can be done poorly, that can be done in a way that actually glorifies God, it can be done in a way that doesn't actually hit the mark. But it's not as simple as to say this character in this show engaged in blasphemy, therefore we should never consume that show. We have to do some actual thinking and some actual analysis of what's going on in order to understand whether or not it actually is violating God's law. Now, there are probably some things, you know, like graphic sex scenes. There's really no reason for Christians to feel drawn to shows that contain that. Again, this is I at this point in my life, and I in earlier periods of my life, I might have been more black and white on this. I am not here to tell you what you can and can't watch. That's not my role. I'm not the Holy Spirit. I'm not your pastor. I'm not any of the persons or people who have an obligation to tell you what is or isn't right. Like, I'm not that person. But I cannot think of personally a reason why a Christian would need to or should ever participate in like enjoying a show that contains graphic sex scenes. The people making those have to sin in order to make those scenes, right? So there are things we should consider that are kind of always off board, right? It's always off board to do physical harm to somebody in the service of making a movie, right? So if you have a movie where people are actively trying to hurt each other in order to produce the film, I'm not sure that we should participate in that. I wouldn't feel comfortable if I knew that was going on in a film. I don't, you know, again, other Christians might, and we can have a conversation about that, but we have to think about those things. Do the actors, do the people who are creating the content, do they have to sin in order to create it? If the answer is yes, we as Christians, I think, should be extremely, extremely wary of even watching or consuming those things. So those are the kinds of questions and situations that I think need to be thought about as we approach pop culture. But I also think, Jesse, you know, you made the point too that popular culture, entertainment broadly, is a gift from God for us to enjoy. And it's okay to enjoy it. It's okay for us to participate in that. You know, we're not the people who are going to say to you like, well, you know, every minute you spend reading, I don't know, reading Will of the Many, every minute you spend reading Will of the Many, you could spend witnessing to people. So therefore you should never read Will of the Many or The Hobbit or whatever it might be. But we should think carefully about what we consume, how much of it we consume, when we consume it. All those are questions that the Christian needs to ask themselves.
I agree. I think the broad test here is actually not that difficult to comprehend. It's probably more that we sometimes hesitate to apply it because we're afraid of what it might mean for the stuff that we're consuming. So again, like ceasing from our work in order to rest holds us together. Like that is something that God gives us as a pattern of relaxation that we should take joy in. It must be the right amount of lawful entertainment or consumption of all of this stuff in pop culture. but it is there. I think like even God gives it our own cultures as a means for us to find that kind of rest and to find some camaraderie and solidarity even with those in whom we interact and live with. I think all of that's fine. Like you said, it gets a little tricky when we start thinking about, well, where is that appropriate line? What is our conviction? But I think part of the problem with that is that we might not be seeking out conviction for ourselves. We not be asking because we hate to find that there is conviction in the things that we're watching because there's going to be a lot of things that society is going to be preoccupied with for entertainment for its own sake. And again, it's an indicator that everybody, men and women, even children, is seeking rest from the burden of their work. And that rest is okay. Even that stuff, like you're saying, Tony, it's interesting. I think so much we're going to come back to is this idea of are we redeeming what we're doing in this process? Are we being not just thoughtful about discerning, adjudicating, or interrogating what we're watching and listening and reading? But as we do it, are we thoughtful people? Are we seeing the themes, even in those joyous things that we find as entertainment, that draw us back to the goodness of God, that explain something about the world he's created or his own character? Finding, of course, that in every story is just a reflection of the greatest story ever told. Like
Yeah.
all of those themes, all the things we are drawn to, that we gravitate towards, that move us, all of those things still come from God. And so therefore, even our entertainment can serve this purpose of not just alleviating our minds and bodies from the burden of ongoing labor in a fallen world, but can also draw us back to God's common grace and his particular grace for his people who are always sinners. So here's the first test. I think it's the most simple one. And everybody's going to throw their listening devices at the wall because it's the one that's the most straightforward. It's the one you might have been thinking you're going to get to eventually. And let's just get it out of the way. I don't say that because it's not worthwhile. I say it because it's exactly the kind of worthwhile test that we should apply. And it applies perfectly in every situation. And that's the Apostle Paul setting out in 1 Corinthians 10:31. Here it is. This is like, top 20 Reformed verses. Whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God. So the beauty of this is, I think, just first pass, first blush, top of the house. If we cannot engage in an entertaining activity in such a way as to glorify God, then it's just unlawful. And by way of contrast, if you can, then we're justified in viewing it as a gift of God's common grace. So I just throw that out there to start with. I think that it's not that we found that this particular test has been tried and left wanting, but rather we haven't tried it very well oftentimes, at least for my own sake. And instead we say, well, the Bible just isn't clear. But if you're watching, your point, Tony, if you're watching something that is gratuitous in any way, and you stop and say, am I glorifying God in the consumption of this? I think it's really difficult to make a strong argument that in some way you are actively, not just passively and saying like, well, it's okay, and there's going to be a redeeming story plot in here somewhere, I hope. But are we actively, whenever we're doing it, or we're consuming these things, are we actually glorifying God? Is God glorified in what's happening with my mind, my thoughts, my body, my eyes, my conversations, how this shapes me, how this changes my worldview? If we have to answer that God is not glorified there, then to my view, it's unlawful. And I think also in the eyes of the Apostle Paul.
Yeah. And, I think something that is important to comment on and think about when we sort of apply that test really has more to do with what's going on in our heart.
Yes.
When we're consuming any particular part, any particular media, than it necessarily has to do with the media itself. I think there are some things that just cannot be consumed to the glory of God, right? You can't watch pornography to the glory of God. Like you just can't do it. You can't watch people murder each other for, to the glory of God. But the vast majority of things that are out there, the question you're asking is not primarily grounded in the content itself. It's grounded in what the content does to us and in us and how we process it. And I think that's why I always want to say, for most things, this goes back to Christian liberty. And Christian liberty is not a license to sin. It's a freedom to obey, right? It's a freedom, and it's a range of possibilities to obey God in different ways, in different situations, rather than some tightly constrained, tightly restricted behavioral code, right? There is a law. God gives us a law. We talked about this at length when we did the 10 Commandments series. He gives us a law, but this law is a set of 10 principles for godly living, not an exhaustive list of do this, don't do that, right? So the seventh commandment, for media, is this inclining my mind towards chastity and purity of thought?
Right.
For those of us who are married, is this likely to create a barrier in my relationship with my wife, or is this likely to enhance the relationship I have with my wife? Is this particular thing I'm doing, this video game that I play, is this likely to draw my attention away from my children when they need me? Or is it something that I have that is likely to increase my ability to pay attention to my children? Or am I able to properly balance the demands that my children have and the needs my children have while I still play this video game? Just as an example. So we can still use those 10 principles to help guide us, but the way that the law is applied to these questions and how it is going to be unique, I think, almost across the board for things. It's going to be unique to each individual. One person may be able to, yeah, like my big thing, and okay, I'm just going to put this out there. I'm just going to lay myself bare here. If I could say that I have one actual real addiction in life, it's probably World of Warcraft. And I know that sounds probably really silly, but even me saying the phrase World of Warcraft in my mind, I'm like, could I figure out a way that I could go back in and play that game? Like, they call it World of Warcraft for a reason. It is super addictive and it's very easy to fall back into it. I'm sure there are people out there who can perfectly just fine, could manage their life of having children and a wife and a job and, service to the church and still play World of Warcraft for a couple hours a week or an hour every night and still be just fine. I cannot do that. If I subscribe to World of Warcraft, it will imbalance my life such that something that God is calling me to, that I know God is calling me to, is going to be pushed out of the way for that. So for me, I cannot fulfill my obligations and participate in that particular element of pop culture. And I think there's probably something like that for most of us. Again, someone else may be able to do that just fine. There are probably many people who can do that just fine. That's a problem in my own heart. And the way I address that is by saying, this is just not healthy for me, so I'm not going to do it. And whether that's a TV show or a book series, I know people who won't read certain books because they get so immersed in it and it sort of like shapes their worldview in really
Right.
unhealthy ways. They just won't pick up a particular set of novels or a particular book series. I've told the story that I don't remember where I was flying. I must have been flying to Minnesota. That's the only place I've traveled by air for quite a long time. I stopped in the bookstore, the souvenir store, whatever, and I forgot a book at home. Of all the people to forget a book. And I was like, there's this big hubbub about Game of Thrones, and maybe the book is better than the show, and I can control what I'm imagining, and it's easier for me to skip over parts, and nobody is having to make graphic sex scenes, even if they're sort of portrayed in the book. I can maybe do this. I got like a chapter and a half into the book and was like, I can't. This is not healthy for me. It's not helpful. It doesn't glorify God. It's not true. It's not noble. It's not honorable. It's not worthy of praise.
Right.
And I just threw the book away. I spent like $15 on a book and then I just threw it in the garbage. And I don't say that to like prop myself up as some bastion of self-control. That's just in that moment I made the right decision. But there are things like that you are going to have to look at your own self to say, I cannot participate in this. Even if someone else might be able to, I personally cannot. And I think that's really the question we need to ask then. Are there universal principles that say I can't do A, B, or C? It's really about my heart in the moment and how my heart is affected by a given thing.
Much like the Ten Commandments, this whole conversation and the scriptural, I think, admonishment here is very much about freeing us up to enjoy freedom, to have joy in these things. It's not about just saying, well, here's a list of things that you can't do. Isn't that unfortunate? Everybody else can do them, but you can't enjoy them. Instead, it's God saying, like you're talking about, Tony, no, put to death all these evil, selfish things that are in your life that are actually destructive, and instead enjoy entertainment and pop culture in such a way that not only glorifies him, but does truly refresh you so that you're not drawn back into patterns of selfish behavior or sinful thinking or all kinds of, sexual frivolity that's going to lead your mind and your body and your heart astray or into places that you'll end up getting hurt. I think the beauty of this is it just provides us with a way to think and discern about the stuff that we're consuming so that we're ensured that it's fulfilling the right purpose that God has for it in our lives. And that's freeing. When you get to a place where the scripture says, like, here's the way, walk in it, then you know that you can walk confidently and you can enjoy that very thing. One great example, I think, that sits on both sides. We can talk about, in some ways, how there's like a lack of, or like kind of a amoral perspective with certain types of medium of expression. One of those, I think, famously is music. Luther famously said, musical performance is principal among the entertainment that God has graciously given us to enjoy in life. And yet, who hasn't been part of either music that has been absolutely refreshing, absolutely life giving, absolutely calming and beautiful, in the same way that, like, David played before King Saul when he was distressed? And maybe you've had this experience where there's some kind of soothing melody that was just a balm to your soul and your condition in that state. And then also on the other side, who hasn't listened even to some really catchy music that's been filled with like sexual perversion, misogyny, violence, themes that at the end of it you may have enjoyed the beat, but it's just left you kind of feeling gross and
Yeah.
disgusted, even with yourself for enjoying it. I think that's what we're after here is like to be freed up to enjoy this kind of entertainment in a way that it is truly the gift that God has given, rather than something that enslaves us. And I'm going to argue that it often does, not because it's just addictive, though it can be, but because it does actually influence us deeply. And I think one thing is clear is that all the things we're talking about here that's present in entertainment, and I'm talking all the way back to things like athletic performance, all of this beauty and creativity, art expressed both in film, literature, and in music, that all of those things God has given us for our good and for his glory. So he wants us to enjoy them. But sin is, of course, going to take all those things and pervert them and twist them in such a way that they no longer become life giving, but become life taking. The problem is they take life incrementally and on the
Yeah.
margin. And so that you rarely feel that that's going on. You rarely sense the divide or the chasm that's creating in your thought patterns, in the way that you interact with people, even the way that you interact with God, until not that's too late, but that's you wake up and you think, my goodness, how far have I gone from what I think this is really
Yeah.
intended to be in my life? Then maybe addiction does crop up in such a place that you're like, this has gone too far. But I think again, like many things in life, when God says no, what he's saying is do not hurt yourself. I know better. I want you to enjoy these things. So I see this as like our opportunity to like empower, to come with the scriptures bearing full weight on what we consume, not because we need more laundry list of things to avoid, but because we need direction on what is best to sink our entertainment time and resources into.
Yeah, and I think that's a good maybe a next test, right? Is we only have a finite amount of time, right? We and I'm not even just talking about like in general we have I'm talking about like we have a finite amount of discretionary time. We all have commitments, we have jobs, we have families, we have church commitments, we have friends that we want to maintain relationships with. The amount of time we have to just like sit down and consume pop culture is limited, no matter who you are. Some people have more, some people have less. Um, we can consume every time we say yes to one thing, we're saying no to another thing, right? There is popular culture or content out there that absolutely is encouraging and
Right.
absolutely is going to enhance your life and it's going to enhance your piety and your devotion to God, right? And I'm not just talking about like Christian content. There's decent Christian content out there. There's decent Christian films. There's decent Christian music. There's decent Christian fiction writing. There's probably even decent Christian video games, although I haven't run into them. I'm sure they're out there. Um, but that's not even what I'm talking about. There are non quote non-Christian, right? There's general grace, common grace works out there that they'll make you smarter. It will make you healthier. It'll help you enhance your life. It'll help you enjoy your world more. It'll help you enjoy and see the beauty in God's creation more. I've commented at length, and this isn't necessarily pop culture, although it kind of bridges the gap a little bit. I've commented at length on how beneficial in my life Ryan Holiday's writings have been.
Right.
Right?
That's what I was
He
thinking of.
doesn't get everything right. There are some things he gets very wrong. But I read Ryan Holiday's Stoic works, and I wouldn't say he's a scholar of Stoicism. He's more like a modern day Stoic philosopher. I read his works and I benefit from it. It makes my life better. It makes my devotion to God better. It makes my piety better. It makes me a better husband and a better father and a better employee. Just in general, it makes me a better person. Not because Ryan Holiday is some special thing, but because he seems to have tapped into common grace principles that other writers haven't. I have a choice, do I want to read that or do I want to read some and don't get me wrong, I enjoy manga, but like do I want to read some meaningless, pointless manga that is just the same story over and over again with different animation? Some people might find that the reading the manga is the right thing for them and that
Right.
enhances their life. But for me, I've had to make that calculation. I only have so much time. I only have so much time to read. Um, and this might be a shock to people. There are times where I will have the decision between reading a theology book and being caught up on my reading in Daily Stoic. I most often will take time to read the Daily Stoic instead of reading something. For example, I'm way behind on Daily Devotion or Daily Doctrine by Kevin DeYoung, way behind. But I'm not behind on Daily Dad or Daily Stoic from Ryan Holiday. That's not because one thing is better than the other necessarily, but what I need in my life and what God is calling me to, the writings by Ryan Holiday right now are more effective in accomplishing those tasks and into shaping me into who I believe God wants me to be. So that's the other question we have to ask is what is the most beneficial thing for us at the moment? It could be some sort of mindless cotton candy entertainment. There's nothing wrong with that. This isn't me saying like this isn't like hustle culture for pop culture. Like
Right.
sometimes you just need to veg out and do something that doesn't require any brain power. And that's what God is giving you as a gift for your rest and your recuperation. Sometimes it's a hard-hitting, heavy theology. Sometimes you need to sit down and read some Bavinck. Again, not that that's pop culture, but I think the broader principle applies. Maybe you need to sit down and read some Turretin, or maybe you need to like scroll Instagram for a little while and watch funny cat videos. All of those
Right.
things are good things. They're all gifts from God in the proper proportions and at the proper time. And that's why this can be such a complicated question, is because we have to have a good, robust, honest reflection of who we are and what we need in order to make these decisions. And it really is about what do we need in the moment? What is God calling us to? What is the wise thing to do right now? The wise thing to consume right now? And I think that's a good test. Is this the most effective thing in accomplishing in my life what needs to be accomplished right now? That could be all sorts of goals, but is this the most effective thing to accomplish that at my life right now? If so, and it's not sinful, and then have at it, enjoy. I think those are the kinds of questions we need to ask. And I don't think we often ask that. I think we are often passive and neutral in decisions about what we're going to watch for pop culture. We're driven by what is the most popular thing on Netflix. What does the algorithm recommend for us? Or what is being talked about at work? Or what do I have on hand? What do I have easy access to? I think we need to be more active and intentional in our decisions on this towards those ends.
Right on. And there's no accounting for taste, right? I mean, part of the time we get caught up in that. So we'll just say, well, maybe what I'm experiencing because I'm a Christian, I'm trying to process this has to do more about like particular medium or the taste or the type of genre or something. And I encourage us to not get too caught up in that. I think what you're saying is really, really helpful. The idea here, I think, is more about embracing the fact that we don't have to be productive all the time and that we don't have to be, and I use this with great love, like puritanical in the sense that, well, if Jonathan Edwards didn't laugh in the Lord's sakes, that was inappropriate, then I shouldn't either. And by virtue of that fact, then I should really have this incredible puritanical work ethic where even when I'm at home or every second that I have, I should be reading something. And if I'm going to read something, it should be productive. Or if I'm going to watch TV, it should be some kind of documentary. I need to learn and fill my mind and make use and redeem every second of that time. What if part of that redemption is enjoying entertainment for the way that God intended it to be? And that when he makes beauty and creativity and artistic expression, and again, we're presuming that this is the right amount of a lawful entertainment, that all of those things are for their own enjoyment because they point back to the creator just by themselves. Like there doesn't have to be an ulterior motive. You don't have to justify it. You don't even have to feel guilty about it. That in fact, because we're contingent beings and therefore we have limited energy supply and unlimited amount of time and space, that all of those things continue to propel us towards some kind of desire for a lawful entertainment that leads us into rest. Even as you're saying, Tony, if that's rest for 10 or 15 minutes before it's the next thing. To feel this compulsion instead to have to, again, quote unquote, redeem that time by being super productive is, I think, a fool's errand because we are as much made to work as we are made to rest. And in that rest, I think sometimes we actually find, for some of us, an easier time identifying and worshiping God in that rest because in our work, we are busy in our work. And we often get caught up in our work thinking all of our work is all of us. And instead, when we rest and we find enjoyment in something, we take a walk, we listen to a beautiful piece of music, we spend some time just conversing about nothing with friends, we sit outside and enjoy beverages together, that something happens sometimes in that space. We're in the pause of that, in the fact that there is beauty that seemingly is without productive purpose, even though I'd argue there is one, it's just hidden behind it and we fail to see it. we are drawn to the fact, so drawn to say, God, are you not good for all of your gifts? And of course, he's good in our gifts of work. He's also good in our gifts of rest. But he's given us this gift as a form of entertainment in our own pop culture for us really to enjoy. But you're right. If we get it twisted such that we consume too much of it, or if we misapply that, I think we're just going to live a less abundant life. So again, like the
Yeah.
task here is not, don't do any entertainment. Get away from all the entertainments. Like what, like your point, Tony, and I've heard Christians say this. I think there can be a browbeating here where it's like, well, couldn't you have used that time more productive? Like if you had a couple more minutes, like maybe you really should have prayed harder, or maybe you should have read that other chapter in the Bible. Maybe you should go back to your genealogies again and read those because you know that you don't read those particularly well. Or maybe you should have studied this thing or that thing. And instead, is there a kind of worship that truly gives itself over to resting in God in the form of appreciating entertainment as he's created it for us to give us that kind of rest? I would say yes. It's just that we often don't talk about it. And sometimes when we do talk about it, it's hard to bring it up because you're gonna feel guilty. Like, can you imagine somebody saying to you, you know what, I'm just finding so much rest these days in this little game on my phone that I get to play? You would be like, you might, if you're like, you know, that person well, you might be like, that's weird. I guarantee though, if that happened to me, I'd walk away. And then when I was with my wife later, I'd be like, let me tell you about this weird thing this person said. You know what I mean? But what
Yeah.
if we need to think more like that, not as a liberty to forsake or abdicate responsibility, but instead to actually be well rested for the responsibility and the task, the good works that God has created for us.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe here's like a concrete example is, I work at a local hospital and my job is relatively intense in terms of emotional investment. I'm a patient relations supervisor, so I'm in charge of the department that hears all of the complaints from patients, which means we often hear some really frustrating stories about people's healthcare, and it can be very emotionally draining. And so I also ride the bus home now. My vehicle is broken right now. Hopefully we're gonna get fixed soon, but I ride the bus home. And for the first couple, I don't know, for the first week that I was riding the bus, I was like, I gotta use this time. I gotta read something. I gotta make sure I'm doing that.
Right.
And what I've learned actually is if I just take the 45 minutes that I'm on the bus and waiting for the bus, and I just sort of zone out and play Pokemon Go, by the time I get home, I'm ready to engage with my kids better. I'm ready to engage with my wife better. I'm less likely to feel just drained and tired because I'm actually letting my brain sort of reset and I'm building that buffer. So something as simple as like playing a relatively mindless game on my phone for a half hour, 45 minutes while I ride the bus and wait for the bus um, helps me to fulfill my obligations as a father and a husband in a more present way. Again, like if you want to ride the bus and you want to read a fiction or you want to do theology reading, like that's on you. That's your decision to make. But I know people who would say to me, you really should be using that time for something more productive than playing Pokemon Go. And yeah, maybe there are times that I should be more productive, and maybe there are times that other people should be less productive. Like I think that's kind of what we're getting at here is
Right.
productivity or spiritual growth or like those categories are each of those are good categories. Like productivity is not a bad thing. Personal devotion is certainly not a bad thing,
Yes.
but
Right.
it's not the only thing. And we also, I think we act as though our lives can be this sort of like perfect integrated balance when really like we have to be able to sort of recognize that sometimes doing nothing has its own utility. Like that feels like a weird thing to say, but I'm with you here, and maybe this is kind of how we bring the episode down to an end. Is I do think there is this obviously the Sabbath principle, the rest principle, um, but God also gives us rest in these other small ways, sometimes not so small, but small ways in the rest of our life. And I don't think that we should bear any shame or guilt or feel like we're less Christian because we take advantage of or make use of those sort of like smaller opportunities to rest. And recreation is recreation. Like that etymology is not a false etymology. That's where the word comes from. And it's because we often need to do these sort of leisurely things in order to be able to then go back and put forward the effort that we need. And the other thing, just I feel like we're tying leisure to the ability to produce in a way that may actually also be unhealthy. Leisure is not necessarily the ends or the means to being able to be productive.
Right.
Leisure serves its own purpose. It has its own use, its own way to glorify God. Yes, it does enable us often to be able to come back and put our nose to the grindstone, but we shouldn't just think about it as like, well, this is just my recharge period. We don't think about sleep that way. I don't think we think about sleep in a fashion of saying like, well, I've got to sleep so that I can just get up and go to work the next day and productive. I think we recognize that our bodies need to rest, and there's a blessing and a joy in being able to close our eyes and sort of drift off and have dreams and rest, and that our body recuperates itself. I think we should think of leisure in a similar sense, and recreation and pop culture all kind of play into that.
Yeah, I think that's right on. I mean, it's one of those things where we're certainly not saying that there isn't rest in prayer and in daily worship and consuming and studying the scriptures. There's certainly a rest in all those activities too. In some ways, I think we're presuming that we are trying to incorporate a balance into our lives. And that part of that balance is just rest for its own sake, the enjoyment of that. And when you're truly, I think, enjoying that rest, whatever it is, one, we do not longer feel guilty because we have processed and passed everything through the sieve of the scriptures and say, this is glorifying to God, is for my good and is for his glory. So therefore, there's no, as it were, like condemnation for me in this because I have a clear conscience about it. And then in addition to that, it does provide us with perhaps, again, that lovely contrast between working hard and then having some period of which we are abstaining from that work and from that labor. And in so doing, we find different ways to please and to worship God. We find that we see his character reflected in different ways. And so in that way too, it reminds us that we are, like I said before, like completely contingent. We get tired, we get exhausted. Like there's only so much the mind can do and so much it can handle. And so by willingly accepting and leaning into that, not again in a way that takes us away or we use as liberty to say, well, I really should spend some time before the Lord in prayer. I really should spend some time in daily particular worship. But you know what? I really need to rest instead. Like, of course, that itself we should be convicted about because then we're using entertainment in such a way to distract us. It pulls us away from God rather than toward him. But the Bible is so clear, like you're saying, Tony, that there's all these seasons in life. And the more I think about those seasons, the more I wonder if we tend to treat them too discreetly and in these two like kind of like prolonged periods. What if a season is for an hour? What if a season is for a day? What if a season is for 5 minutes? So famously, of course, when we have the teacher writing in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, some of these famous words, I think we just fail to take them to heart. Listen to this beautiful contrast, and I think it really fits in with what we're saying here about the ability to rightly consume entertainment and pop culture in such a way that it is glorifying to God in our understanding of it, in our application of how it gives us true rest. So it writes things like this: there's a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down, a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. So it's very clear that God has given us, I think, all of these wonderful things to enjoy as part of his character, as demonstrations of the fact that he is a God who is loving, and love always leads to giving. And so he gives us beauty in arts, in music, in literature, in screen. And of course, then we should recognize, because those are things from God, or we ought to, that every good and perfect gift comes down from the Heavenly Father who is above, that it is the prerogative of the devil to twist and bend those things in such a way that we fail to see them as God's gifts, and instead see them as our rightful consumption in such a way that enslaves us, changes our mindset, pulls us farther away from God. So I think part of it is just going into everything, with the pun intended, with eyes wide open. So hopefully some of these tests have been helpful. I think people probably have, because like you said, Tony, there's a lot of Christian liberty here. And maybe some point, well, I was going to ask you, like, what's, I'm not going to ask this because I'm going to ask it back to me, but like, what would be maybe something you consume that others might be like, ooh, but I don't want you to ask that back to me. We could do that. We could do that if you want to.
Yeah, let's do that in a future episode. I think
We'll
that'd be
save
fun.
that for another time so everybody keeps listening. But I think one of the things that we should be encouraging our listeners to do, the people who are part of the Reformed Brotherhood, is come hang out online in this place called Telegram, which is just a chat messaging app. And we have a little corner, protected corner of the world there, which is a group of people who are like minded, listening to our conversations and participating in their own. And the way they participate with us is you can message in the app. They've got a bunch of channels of different topics. So you can get there by going to t.me/Reformed Brotherhood. I bring this up now, not just to advertise as usual, because we want you to come be a part of this, but I would love to hear from others because we have a channel in there that's just about the conversations we're having on the podcast. Come share some of the practical things that you use, the tests that you have, the conversations that you bring forward to help you discern what kind of pop culture you're consuming. Don't
Yeah.
just take our word for it. Let's hear what the Holy Spirit, how he is leading you in this process that every Christian really must engage in. So coming out, that's t.me/Reformed Brotherhood.
Yeah, and I'll throw my 2 cents on there too. Is this really is the most friendly corner of the Christian internet? That's not to cast shade on other venues and other things, but my experience with this group of people is that it's the most low key, chill, and genuine group of Christians online that I've ever encountered. And so I think like in some places you couldn't have that conversation honestly, because the
Right.
second you say I watched this show or I've read this book and I enjoy it, somebody is jumping down your throat to tell you that you're terrible and awful. And I've been that person. Like don't get me wrong. Like I've been that guy online who tells you that you're the worst person in the world because I don't know, because you watch The Office. I wouldn't say The Office because I love The Office, but like I've been that guy. That guy doesn't exist in our Telegram chat. Like you
Right.
you are not going to have people who are going to be jumping on your throat. But also, people there are honest and they're straightforward and they're going to back up what they say with biblical reasoning. If they think that the thing you're watching is not a healthy thing, then they're going to tell you and they're going to share with you why they think it is, but they're going to do it in a way that is charitable and honest and respectful. And at the end of the day, a lot of times there's disagreements and we just say, you know what, it's not worth it to have strife among the brethren here. So we're just going to let this conversation fade away until
Right.
another day. So do check it out, t.me/Reformed Brotherhood. I really think it's great. It's encouraging. I say it every single time we bring this up. There is an active prayer channel where you can share your prayer requests. And not only will people pray for you, but it is not uncommon for people to type out the prayer that they're praying for you in that chat so you know what they're
Right on.
praying, which is something I've never experienced online. So I think it's a great place to be. I think it's a really, really fun group to be a part of, and it's encouraging, it's edifying. And again, it's a great place to have some fun conversations. There's a meme group, there's topic discussions. We are going to be coming up on a new series in September here. I don't think we're quite ready to say what it is. You have to keep you coming back for something, but we're going to be coming up on a new series in September, but we have a couple more episodes that are sort of grab bag episodes. So this next series is going to be a long one, I think. I think we're probably talking about like probably like 8-9 months, if not more. It's going to be a long one. So if you've
Yes.
got a topic that you would like us to talk about on the
Here's your
show,
chance.
here's your chance. Come into the Telegram chat, look for the topic suggestions channel, make your suggestion. There's a good chance we'll take it because we would rather talk about the things you want to talk about than whatever random topic we come up with. So please do check it out, t.me/Reformed Brotherhood. We would love to hear what you're thinking.
All right, so let's close it out this way. And you already gave us one, Tony. So you're under no obligation to give a second, but I would love it if you had one. And I can answer first if you want to. But here's the question I think we should end with is what's one thing, one form of pop culture entertainment that you are lawfully enjoying right now that's bringing you rest? So you talked about Pokemon Go. Do you want a second to think and I'll give you mine?
Yeah, why don't you go first and I'll come up with one.
So the thing that I'm enjoying is I really do find that the older I get, and listen, I was going to give you a big explanation of why I enjoy this. And in the spirit of what we just talked about, I'm not going to do that because I'm just enjoying this. And I believe it's something that God has given me that I'm really finding rest in. I've just been reading the Brandon Sanderson Mistborn series. I'm in the second book. The storytelling is awesome. Honestly, I mean, maybe one of the reasons I'm drawn to it is I'm finding, of course, all of these themes in there about redemption and sacrifice. And again, these things lead us, I think, back to God the Father when the Holy Spirit has illuminated us such that we have been regenerated and we see those things most clearly. But it's just incredible storytelling. And I'm finding that it's one of those books where this is not like affirming with, it's just I'm telling you about my rest. It's one of those books. I think you probably had this experience, Tony, where like you pick it up and you read and time just kind of like goes by. And then you look up and you're like, oh my goodness, I've been sitting here for an hour. And I'm just like just 2 weeks ago, I sat outside reading big part of the first book. Actually finished a large section of it that I didn't intend to finish when I sat down. And I was just sitting outside and I closed it and the ending was so good. And you ever have like a good fiction book, you close it and you just think, huh. And you sit there for a little while and you think. And I found it was one of the most restful hours that I've had, I'll be honest, in a long time. So I'm just enjoying that kind of reading. And it's good. I mean, I have a clean conscience about it. Don't worry about any nonsense, any of that stuff. It's just good storytelling. But somebody could easily, with great legalism, come along and be like, how dare you? You're reading fiction. You're reading fantasy fiction.
There's magic.
Yeah. What? Yeah, exactly.
Magic and killing.
What is this? Get this out of here. So I say that unashamedly that I'm really enjoying the Mistborn series. Okay, what about you?
Yeah, my wife and I just started a new series, and I'll be honest, like looking at some of the trailers, we may get to a point, depending on how some of the trailers are, where we say we can't continue watching this. But we just started a new series called Chiefs of War. Have you heard about this series at all? Yeah, it's Jason Momoa. It's a historical drama of the history of the unification of the Hawaiian Islands. And it is very much rooted in history, but also legend. And it is deeply, deeply authentic is the way that I've heard it described. So Jason Momoa is of Hawaiian descent, and he has been sort of working on this project for like a decade. So it's pretty violent. It's a historical drama around tribal warfare in a culture that was pretty brutal. But it's very enjoyable. It's very well done. The cinematography is beautiful. The camera work is absolutely gorgeous. The soundscape is gorgeous. They're using authentic, and I don't know how you figure this out. I'm not a linguist, but they're using authentic sort of archaic Hawaiian dialect, which is really, really beautiful to listen to. If you really like, you could just close your eyes and listen to it. It's a really beautiful language. So I'm really enjoying it. Again, we've only watched a little bit of we watched the first episode, a little bit of the second. Some of the trailers look like there might be some spicy scenes that aren't so great. And maybe once we get to them, we might decide like we've invested this time, but it's not going to be something that benefits us. And maybe we'll be able to get past it. Who knows? Maybe we'll be fine with it. Maybe the trailers are all there is. So I've really been enjoying it. My wife and I tend to take every Friday evening as our kind of TV date night, because the other nights of the week we're trying to get stuff done and read and study and do our thing. But yeah, it's been very good. I'm also watching the Lord of the Rings series, or the Rings of Power. I'm trying to finish season 2. It's kind of a slow slog. There's nothing like overtly, I don't know, sultry in it, but it's not super compelling. I'm one of those people that like, once I've started a series, I really need to feel like I can finish it. It's hard for me to stop a series. But yeah, I think those are the two big ones that I'm watching right now that I just kind of like take a little bit of time. I watch the Rings of Power show like 15 to 20 minutes at a time during my lunch break. I don't really get a lunch break because I'm a salaried person, but like when I'm eating my lunch at work, I'll put that on my laptop and watch 15 or 20 minutes at a time and then shut it off. So it'll take me like 150 years to get through the second season, but it's enjoyable. That's what I've been watching.
Yeah, there you go. See, by the way, that brings an interesting point, which we can't even get into right now. But you know what is also underrated is the tiny little legitimate breaks at work where you actually do something completely different. Like you said, like read something that's just for fun, like truly for fun. Not that you're trying to bone up on or study on or it's related, or not just like catch up your emails, or watch a video, or go to YouTube and watch something for your favorite, again, lawful subscriptions. Definitely underrated. You take a little bit of that time, it can be so refreshing. And then again, I think that once we have that time and we're rejuvenated or we're changed in it to some degree, it does cause us to worship God in a different way. It draws our attention back to him as the one who gives all things, as the giver of life, giver of energy, giver of renewed minds and renewed states. Like all of that happens in the course of rest. So you've heard it from us, loved ones, but we'd love to hear it from you. Again, you got to come hang out with us. T.me/Reformed Brotherhood. Jump in the chat and tell us how you are resting and how you decide to consume all of this lovely entertainment and pop culture that God has given us.
Yeah. Well, Jesse, I think that's as good of a place for us to wrap it up tonight. I appreciate this conversation. I think it's a good conversation for us to have. We are very excited to get into our next series, but again, is a couple weeks here where we still have some grabbing episodes. So this is your chance. And Jesse, until next time, honor everyone.
Love the brotherhood.
What if I'm far from home? Oh, brother, I would hear you call. What if I lose it all? Oh, sister, I would help you out. If the sky comes falling down for you, there's nothing in this world